MAC or the bridge ID, and that becomes the route, and then they calculate the route bridge hops from that. So in this case, switch 1 wins because it has the lowest bridge ID. And then all of the rest of it, no, these guys are now sending out information about the cost of 5 and 4 back and forth to each other. This segment over here, because we're now looking at extra costs to get there, so 0 and 0, these are going to be the lowest cost routes. This is going to be a cost of 1. This is going to be a cost of 1. This cost of 4, this cost of 5 are going to be higher. So what's going to happen is they're going to actually block this port. So here's the example of how we might calculate this, right? So the route is here. There's a cost of 5. Oh, this is a made up cost of 5. We have a cost of 4. We have a cost of 4. If this cost is 5 and this cost is only 4 to get back to the route, then this port's going to get blocked. Somebody modified this to have a cost of 5 because this by default would be a cost of 1. But you can set that priority. So that's what we're showing here. You can change the cost back to the route. So this one, we've got a cost of 5 on the interface. We add the 0, because that's the link to the route, plus the 5 equals 5. In this case, the cost is 4 on this link. It's also 4 on this link. We add those costs. 4 plus 4 is 8. Back over here, 0 plus 4 is 4. This switch goes, okay, my route cost is out gig 01 is 5. My route cost out 02 is 8. Going to take the lower cost. This port will be blocked. This guy over here, he would actually have a cost of 4 plus 5 would be 9 going the other way. And just cost of 4 plus 0 over here. So his route, best path to route is gig 02 at a cost of 4, not the gig 01 at a cost of 9. And he's going to also determine that this is not the best path and block that port. So here's what everything would look like based on our switches. So we have, note we only have one blocking. We're only actually blocking one direction. In this case, it's switch 03, gig 02 is being blocked. Not a route port, not a designated port. So it's not going to send any traffic across that or listen to any traffic other than BPDUs coming across that link. It's still going to listen to BPDUs because that's how it's going to determine if it loses connectivity or the path cost gets better coming from switch 2. No, all the other ports are in a forwarding state, either because they're route ports or because they're designated ports on a LAN and they don't need to go into a blocking state. Now, different port types have different costs by default, according to the IEEE, and they are adjustable, so you can change the cost if you so choose. Note that if you have older equipment before 1998, that probably means you need to replace it because it's really old and should go away. But if you do happen to have that equipment, the default costs are different than they are now after 2004. And in between 1998 and 2004, they pretty much maintained this, added the 100 gig in here. And I think the cost was a 1 on 100 gig during that time. But since then, everything's gone to this, and this should be where you're at now. Note the cost of a 10 meg link is rather high, and the cost of a 1 terabyte link is 20. So it still leaves room for adding additional stuff beyond a terabyte. By default, here are the timers. So there's a hello message every 2 seconds. And why do we want hello messages so often? Any thoughts? Exactly, Jeff. In case we lose a link, right? If we lose a link, we need to have that recovery time not be ages. So if we don't have hello messages frequently, then we won't know that a link has gone down and the network won't be able to heal. The max age, basically, by default, is set to 10 times the hello. So if we lose a link, we're going to have 20 seconds, up to 20 seconds now, doesn't have to be 20 seconds, of time when the network could be down, right? We're losing packets because they can't get there. So therefore, by default, 20 seconds. That can be adjusted. And then we have a forward delay of 15 seconds. So this is a delay that will essentially stop a port from going between the blocking state and the forwarding state. So it goes to this listening state, and it will listen to BPDUs, but it won't start forwarding traffic off. And you may have experienced this if you've plugged in a device, any device, into a switch, where it looks like it's up, but it doesn't actually send traffic for that first 15 seconds. That is so that it can learn about what's going on the network. And so you don't create switch loops when you plug in devices. So during this time, it's learning, and what happens is it should be receiving BPDUs, hellos, during that time, and it should be able to determine if that port should come up or not. So here's the example of what happens when this link goes down. So we have a link failure somewhere here between switch 1 and switch 3. This port was in blocking. So we no longer we're sending hellos here maybe, but we're no longer getting hellos down here every 2 seconds like we were. So now this switch still has that information for 10 times the hello, so for 20 seconds. It's going to maintain that this is still the root port. However, after that 20 seconds, it no longer has this information flushed from its system. And now the only way it can get back to root is from this port. It will take this port and put it into a forwarding state once the timer's expired. Right, so it knew previously, because it learned that it could get to root from here previously, that this becomes an alternate port or an available port, so that when this port goes down, it can unblock this port. So once it knows this one's down, after the timers expire, this port, it will immediately change to forwarding because it was a alternate port without any further delay. There's obviously going to be delay because we have to wait for this timer to expire. So it's not instantaneous. So that's normal spanning tree. We also have rapid spanning tree. And rapid spanning tree has a shortened mechanism for forwarding. And sometimes this can lead to some duplicate packets and forwarding things that shouldn't be forwarded, but its convergence time is much quicker. So remember, the other one was 20 seconds by default. This one's about 2 seconds by default, because as soon as it loses a hello, it will start sending packets out the backup port. So it has a backup port to get somewhere. It will use that backup port. So this is showing you different link types. Rapid spanning tree will define ports as either point-to-point or shared. And this is shared because it's a hub. Other than that, they're all going to be basically point-to-point ports. So you probably never run across this unless you have like wireless access points or wireless bridges potentially. Rapid spanning tree is faster, but rapid spanning tree is not necessarily a standard. So therefore, if you have two different manufacturers of switches, rapid spanning tree may not be an option. It may be because there are some manufacturers that do, other than Cisco, that do support it. But you have to be aware of your environment. So what if I have switches connected and they're connected, say, at 1 gig? So I have, say, 48 ports on switch 1, 48 ports on switch 2, 48 ports on switch 3, and there's a whole bunch of users. And all I have is, and they're all connected at 1 gig, and everybody's connected at 1 gig, and we're trying to communicate. What happens if Bob down here and Bob 2 down here both want to communicate at a gig up to Archie and Archie 2? Can they? If I only have one connection between the switches. Can two devices on switch 3 communicate to 2 devices on switch 2, both at a gig, if I only have a 1 gig link? Yes, Jeff, performance will be less than desirable, right? I can't push 2 gigs across a 1 gig link. So therefore, they're not going to get a gig. They're going to get a fraction of that gig, 50% if it was equally distributed. So I have this concept of ether channels or port channels that will allow me to combine multiple interfaces into what the switch will treat as a single interface at higher bandwidth. So in this case, they're bundling 2 links between the switches, giving me a 2 gig total. And then if I had 2 devices down here, Bob and Bob 2, that wanted to talk to Archie and Archie 2, both at 1 gig, they would be able to do that. And it's not truly combining those interfaces. So one device still is going to be limited to 1 link, typically, depending on how I do my load balancing of those. I'm only ever going to get 1 gig of throughput if it's a 1 gig set of 1 gig links. But multiple devices each would use different links at that point, giving me a combined throughput of 2 gigs or more, depending. And I think the next module we'll get into the configuration of rapid spanning tree and ether channel. They're not really the same.